Hello and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast on this Wednesday, April 30th. Happy last day of April, everybody. Got a good show for you today. First, I want to go over some of the college football playoff contenders from the SEC, kind of rank them. It's going to be a really interesting year for the SEC. There's, I think, 7 or 8 teams at least that have legitimate shots. So I want to go over some of those first. Also going to talk a little bit about this Bill Belichick North Carolina drama, kind of what's happening in the media with his interview with Hard Knocks, all of that. So we're going to get into that as well. And then I want to talk about why is the state of Florida not producing blue chip quarterback recruits in one of the most talent-rich recruiting states in the nation, not really producing quarterbacks. I want to dive into that and kind of what's happening there. Also going to talk a little bit about some of the winners, some of the losers from the spring transfer portal, and some programs that really took a step forward, some took a big step back. And then finally, to end our day, make sure you stick around. I'm going to talk about some of the best running back rooms in the country. This is obviously subjective, but some of the teams, programs that I think have really great running back rooms, great situations there for the 2025 year. But before I get into anything, I just want to remind everyone that this show is all about you. We thrive on your comments, your questions, opinions, insights, all of that. We love hearing from you. We want to make this as interactive, as exciting as possible. And one easy way to do that is to use the Super Chat feature. To do that, you can go ahead, click the $ in the bottom of the chat box to send in your comment, question, opinion there. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also just a great way to support our channel and support what we're trying to do here at GSMC. We're so grateful to have you all as a part of our community here, and we thank you for your ongoing support. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the SEC and kind of what's happening in terms of contenders. So I think right now there's a clear-cut top 2 in Texas and Georgia. I have Texas as the number 1 team in the SEC coming into this season. So there's a couple reasons for this. Texas, obviously they did lose some talent, but they also got some big pickups in the portal. Picked up Emmet Mosley the 5th, picked up Jack Endries, also have Ryan Wingo returning, DeAndre Moore returning, and then defensively they signed a couple guys in the winter portal. And then you also have Anthony Hill Jr., who's not a bad football player himself, Malik Muhammad, Colin Simmons. They're all going to be returning on each level of the defense. Simmons on the D-line, Anthony Hill at linebacker. Malik Muhammad has that one cornerback spot locked down. This is a loaded Texas team. Also, a report came out today that said that this Texas roster could potentially cost $35 to $40 million. So a lot of high-profile transfers, a lot of high-profile renegotiations with some of their returning guys. But this is a team that is still stacked, and I think they have a pretty manageable schedule. Didn't get a really tough SEC slate this year. Their big SEC games are going to be at Georgia, and I also think at Florida could be potentially a trap game there. I do think they beat Florida most likely, but it is in the swamp, and Florida, I think, is a little more talented than people give them credit for, so that could potentially be a tough game. And then, obviously, week 1, you have the semifinal rematch of Texas at Ohio State. In the shoe, it's going to be a tough road game for Texas, but I think if they split those Ohio State-Georgia games, even if they lose both of them, they're still probably a college football playoff contender. This is a team that's going to be right up there. Could be a preseason number 1 kind of team, but they're going to be stacked, and we're going to see what Arch Manning can do, too, in his first year as a starter. Obviously, this is a pretty smooth transition from quarterbacks, from Quinn Ewers to a guy that's even more hyped than Quinn Ewers was in Arch Manning, taking over as the full-time starter in 2025. We're going to see what he can do as the full-time guy. I'm excited about the prospects of Arch, but, it's very possible that he could struggle. I think the support, though, around him at Texas gives them a very high floor at the minimum and potentially an even higher ceiling. Then obviously right behind them is Georgia. So Georgia didn't add a whole lot in the portal. Kirby Smart's never been a really big portal guy. He kind of uses it more strategically to fill certain holes. Got some additions at wide receiver, brought in Zachariah Branch from USC, brought in Noah Thomas from Texas A&M to kind of fill out that room. And they also brought in a running back in Josh McCray from Illinois, Elo Medozier from Army on the defensive side of the ball in the spring portal to kind of fill some of those holes that guys like Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, Trevor Etienne all left at Georgia. But these weren't like eye-popping, multi-million-dollar NIL deals, more guys that filled a specific role for Georgia. This is a team that also didn't really lose a whole lot in the portal. Not a lot of guys transferred out, so they still have most of their depth. They still have a lot of those blue-chip recruits that they brought in just from high school recruiting, and didn't really have any long-term injuries either throughout spring practice, which is something that other teams have struggled with. I also think that the big two question marks here for Georgia is going to be that young offensive line. They're not super proven. And then obviously, quarterback, it seems like it's going to be Gunnar Stockton. That's what everything's kind of indicating right now. Ryan Puglisi is still in contention, but this seems like it's going to be Gunnar Stockton's team. Kirby Smart traditionally kind of relies on quarterbacks that are smarter, have a bigger grasp of his offense, of the scheme, and it seems like Gunnar Stockton is that. We're going to see what he can do. I think that's also going to be a big question mark for them, and the play of Gunnar Stockton and that O-line is really going to determine what Georgia can do this upcoming year. But this is a team that I think at the minimum still wins 9 or 10 games. They still have Kirby Smart as that head coach. They still have all the talent that they brought in over the past couple years, and they didn't really lose a whole lot either. So Georgia's still going to be right up there at the top with Texas. I think those are the clear-cut top two in the SEC. Now, after that, it gets really murky. There's probably, I think, 5 or 6 teams at least that could all potentially be that third team in the SEC. So right now, I have kind of an outside-the-box pick, but I think South Carolina is that number 3 team going into this season. So 9-3 last year, rattled off 6 straight wins to end the season. LaNorris Sellers really came into his own as a quarterback, and I think with a full offseason, with another year coming in being the starter, this guy is going to really shine. Electric dual-threat quarterback. I think he can take them super far. I'm excited to see what South Carolina can do. I know certain people aren't as high on LaNorris Sellers. I've seen him live. I've seen his highlights as well. I think this guy is just a special talent at quarterback and can really drive South Carolina to heights that they haven't seen in a while. You also have Dylan Stewart, the freshman phenom from last year, coming back to anchor that defensive line. He's going to be even better in year 2. Could be one of the best edge rushers in the SEC, in the country even. I think I'm really excited about South Carolina. I think with another year, I think they could potentially do some damage in the SEC. They did lose a couple key pieces. Lost Kyle Kennard, lost Nick Emmanwori. So they did lose some guys where there's going to be question marks on the defensive side of the ball especially. But I think LaNorris Sellers and also Shane Beamer, I really like him as a head coach. I love what he's done with South Carolina, kind of turning that program around. I'm excited to see what they can do this year. I'm a little higher on them than some others, but I think the potential for South Carolina is really high. Then I had Alabama at 4. Obviously, Alabama, disappointing year in Kalen DeBoer's year 1 as the head coach. I also think just him being year 2 as the head coach, going to be a lot more comfortable in Tuscaloosa. You're replacing probably the greatest college head coach ever, at least in modern history,
in Nick Saban. So expectations were sky high, and they still went 9-3 last year. They did not end on a great note last season, losing to Michigan in that bowl game where they really should not have. There was no business for them to lose to Michigan. But this is still Alabama. This is still a team that has a ton of talent across the board, blue chip guys at basically every position. And also, I like Kalen DeBoer as a head coach. This is a guy that's won everywhere he's been in every single program. And I think that also getting Ryan Grubb back in the fold as his offensive coordinator is really going to help them, help their continuity. Ryan Grubb was a guy that had been with him throughout basically every step of his coaching career. And really, that offense, that was the main reason why Washington went to the national championship a few years ago, was Ryan Grubb's offense, was what they can do. I'm excited to see in that scheme what kind of happens with Alabama. Obviously, there's going to be a new quarterback there in Ty Simpson, most likely. But I think this team just has too much talent to really struggle. I don't think they take a step back. If anything, I think they stay kind of the same level. But I think this is a team that definitely could make a jump, could certainly be in that college football playoff conversation. I think they pretty much will be hanging around that conversation for the entire season. I think Alabama, though, is really going to take a step up. And then at 5, see, here's where it gets tricky, because you have teams like LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida, even potentially Oklahoma, Auburn, that all can make big jumps. I have LSU at 5 right now. So my main reason for that is Garrett Nussmeier returning as the starting quarterback after a first year as a starter where he threw for 4,000 passing yards. But they've also really hit the portal hard. LSU, Brian Kelly, and the Bengals, they have added 17 new guys throughout the transfer portal, throughout the winter and spring portals, and really trying to bolster the depth of that program. So on offense, they brought in Barron Brown, wide receiver from Kentucky, also brought in Nick Anderson, really impressive wideout from Oklahoma. And then you also got a really interesting quarterback transfer in Michael Van Buren, who came from Mississippi State, former top 300 kind of guy, started a good chunk of games last year for Mississippi State. He's transferring to LSU, going to back up Garrett Nussmeier, and then could potentially take over as the quarterback of the future for LSU. So you have a lot of guys that, at the minimum, add depth, and at the highest point, they can really raise the ceiling of this LSU team. I think they kind of bounce back. Also, you have Harold Perkins Jr. returning on defense. I'm really curious to see if he solidifies himself as a first-rounder, how much he shows out. He is moving to a new position on the defensive side of the ball, how that'll shake out. But this is a guy that has all the talent in the world. Great freshman season, kind of struggled throughout last year a little bit, but I think he can have a really great year. And then my next 3 are kind of like, I have Ole Miss, I have Tennessee, and I have Florida all up there. I kind of think they're all interchangeable right now. Tennessee, I think I would have had a little higher, if not for the whole Nico situation. They're going to have to bring in Joey Aguilar. He's going to have to learn a whole new offense with brand new wide receivers. I think that could be a little bit of a struggle, or at least there could be a little adjustment time there. Ole Miss, obviously, last year was their most talented roster probably ever. Just barely missed the college football playoff. Honestly, self-inflicted wounds for them. But they're replacing a bunch of guys. Losing, obviously, Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, J.J. Pegues, Trey Amos. A lot of production losing from Ole Miss. But you have a really promising quarterback in Austin Simmons coming in. They obviously hit the portal really hard. That's Lane Kiffin's kind of mojo. That's what he does. I think they're going to be interesting. I don't know if they're really going to be up there this year, but if everything goes right, I think they could. And then Florida, I think, too, is interesting. Their losses last year were all to top 25 teams. You have quarterback DJ Lagway coming back. Did just start throwing again. So I know I talked about that a while ago, but DJ Lagway is throwing again, so that's good. So hopefully those shoulder concerns are not as bad now. I think they're a really intriguing team, though, especially if DJ Lagway kind of takes that next step into becoming an elite quarterback. But this is going to be a really interesting conference. I'm not honestly sure. My whole list could be completely wrong. I think Texas and Georgia are definitely those top two teams right now. But we're going to have to see how the rest of the SEC shakes out. And it's going to be a wild ride to watch. So right now we are going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Hoodie Bill and what's going on in North Carolina, because it's really interesting right now. But stick with us. We'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.